wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today we decided to pull apart the story of miscarriage, to give it voice, to reach out to other women that have been through the experience that we both personally have as well, and feel like there's not the space to discuss it, a knowledge of where to put those feelings, and even, I don't know, even just being able to sit in it and recognise what you've been through. So that's really the purpose of what we're wanting to do today, and hope that you're able to resonate with on some level. Even if you personally haven't been through a miscarriage, I have no doubt you know someone who has. So I'm going to start with a reading out of This Too Shall Pass. And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain: when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what the storm's all about.
I just got tingles.
I know, I could cry. Bridget, now you're going to be very vulnerable.
I am.
And you're going to share a story.
A letter that I wrote. Yeah. So I mean, what I really found from my own experience was just that I felt so isolated, and I just wanted to get out how I felt. I can still go back to that feeling the morning after I'd found out I'd had a miscarriage, and you know, when you're kind of in that state between asleep and just waking up, and for a split second I thought I was still pregnant, and then this nightmare, that kind of sense of a nightmare, just overcame me as I woke up. And so I wrote this, and I've dated it. So I've got here Thursday the 12th of January 2012, 7:20 a.m. Despite that niggling feeling I had that you wouldn't be there, today was to be the day we'd tell the world about you. My boss would know, and we'd talk about maternity leave. The rest of Marcus's family would know, and I'd send my friends the happy message that all was on track. But it wasn't to be. The biggest fear I'd had all along, a miscarriage, happened. All along I wasn't concerned about the, NT results or the problems with the pregnancy. All I worried about was seeing your heartbeat and your wriggly web-like fingers and toes at the 12-week scan. The safe point. Increasingly at times, I didn't feel like this pregnancy was real. But I and others tried to brush it off as negative talk, and that's not healthy for the baby. Maybe I need to give in to my intuition a bit more. I think subconsciously I must have known you were no longer there. As I read about miscarriage, a topic I tried to avoid because it scared the crap out of me, more spiritual people than me talk about losing a child. For us, it was the loss of what could have been, what was meant to be. Science tells me you're just a bunch of cells, and on the ultrasound screen, that's all you look like. But you brought the promise of so much more, and now it's gone. We tried to be pragmatic and not get ahead of ourselves. We didn't buy anything for you, or the nursery, for fearing of jinxing it. But we did imagine you in my swelling belly, at our coming weddings, beach days and housewarmings, gushingly telling people about you and the hopes we had. Those days are gone for now, but hopefully not forever.
Oh, Bridget.
So that gives you a glimpse of where I was at when the day after I'd had my 12-week scan, thinking, but I had this feeling, and I knew, part of me knew, but I didn't want to go there. That was, my journey was to experience it in that way. And it took a long, long time for me to become okay with that, but now I'm so grateful. And in fact, if that hadn't happened, there was no way that my path would have been like this, because there was that loss, that perception that I really was missing something, gave me such a strong drive and intention to have the pregnancy that I had, have the birth that I had, make the connections that I had, meet you, I don't know that had it have worked the way it was supposed to, in inverted commas, because that pregnancy I fallen pregnant straight away. I think I probably would have taken it a little bit for granted.
Well, just that been on it. It's like sliding doors.
It's just different. It was sort of so different, because there was almost that struggle. you know, through that struggle came this intense intention, you know, which is so difficult to see when you're in it. And my God, like that pain, you know, you can drop back into it, can't you?
Oh, I easily can. I really heard you saying in that, that people more spiritual than you talk about losing a baby. What do you mean by that?
It's interesting because I've evolved a lot. You know, that was 3.5 years ago. And I don't think that I really allowed myself to feel like that. I think I tried to, you know, rationalize it, you know, take that scientific angle. But I think maybe a way of trying to distance myself from the pain of it, you know, by saying that it wasn't a baby, you know, it was just science or whatever. You know, which is often, some people will say that, you know, people say, oh,
I think
wasn't
that's
meant to
the
be.
messages you generally get.
Yeah.
Because I had a missed miscarriage, which is when we have in our heads, well, I had in my head that a miscarriage is,
you know, about it,
cramping and blood, and you know that it's happening. Whereas my experience, like yours, was I rock up for my 12-week scan, everything's fine, in commas, no awareness of anything other than I'm pregnant, only to be told on the ultrasound monitor that there's no life there. And then once that's happened, then you have the choice to either wait and see, which is not recommended in the general society for fear of
infection or
and
something.
bleeding too much, having a hemorrhage, or you go into hospital and you have a D&C, so curette, where they clean everything out. So I ended up doing the curette and having a D&C, but it wasn't until 2 days later after that scan. And that 2 days was so hard for me. I can't even imagine going back there, but I can't imagine women doing that without any support around them. Because all of a sudden I felt like my body had failed me. My womb was a tomb. It wasn't a place of life anymore.
And I'd never heard that expression until you said it. And it's quite, like, eerie, you know, like, but
that's how I felt. I had this, for me, it was my baby and always was from the moment of conception. So for me, I had lost a child, which nobody recognized, because everywhere I went, I was told about the cystoblast, whatnot, number of cells.
And it was just I remember one doctor saying, oh, it's just a blighted ovum.
That's what it was. Yeah. And I'm going, no, this was my baby. This is my baby. And no one gives voice to it, and no one around you knows what to do or how to do it, because we're supposed to just get over miscarriages. We almost, I think because of IVF and being female fertility being such consciousness, we really have gotten so comfortable with the concept of several miscarriages that they've kind of become almost like a period.
Yeah.
And I really want to take that back and go, it's not. Like birth, it's a rite of passage, it's a moment, it's a promised future, it's a child. It's all of those things wrapped in one little bundle and one experience. And how could you not give that woman that you love or yourself the moment to grieve that child, to grieve that future, to sit in those painful emotions, and time for your body to heal, for your heart to heal, and for your mind to process what that means. Because certainly for me, coming from a background of very, very strong physical connection and emotional connection to my body, to come full circle to which maybe is the whole point of it, to come full circle to a point of my body's failed me and I clearly don't read my body the way I thought I did. And mistrust.
Kind of humbling, you know, like
it is in a way. Yeah, totally. Is, you know, I don't know. I just kind of think there's a huge amount of grief there that's never talked about, and no one knows how to honour that or how to even say it to their circle of friends. It brings up the question about whether we tell people we're pregnant in those pre-12 weeks or not. I really believe that it's a really good idea. You don't have to tell everyone, and you certainly wouldn't post it on Facebook, but to tell the people that if something happened you want recognition of and nurturing by, you need to tell those people when you're pregnant, because if that happens, you need support, you need
and
community.
Also, you know, the same people who are likely to celebrate you are also going to be there to help you, you know, commiserate if that's the way that it goes. So it's not kind of a nice way to think about it, but, you know, they are your inner sanctum, you know, and you want them there. You want them there to celebrate the highs and to be there with you in the lows.
You really do. And if you're a woman who hasn't had a miscarriage and you have a friend or a loved one who has, then what do you do? So I've kind of really tuned into this, and a beautiful friend of mine recently had a miscarriage. And she chose not to tell anybody. And I'd kind of heard about it vicariously because a mutual friend of ours who's quite close had picked up on that she was avoiding school drop-offs and pickups and just kind of keeping to herself, which was unusual behaviour for her. And she had told her, and then this friend had said to me, you have to go and surely you're the person to help her here, aren't you? You know?
Yeah,
I went, yes, you know what, I am. And I turned up at her house with some food, a bunch of flowers, a candle, my birth story from Lola's birth, which also includes my miscarriage experience, and a beautiful letter. And she didn't. Beautiful. Well, this is what I want to talk about with the honouring. She actually at that time didn't answer the door. She was having a shower, and so I left them all there. And she wrote back to me several hours later, and she said, I've been in such tears that I couldn't even access before you gave me the moment to do that. And it's allowed me to get back into contact with how I feel about it, and that it's okay to grieve, and it's brought connection with my husband, and because I've been so distant with everybody. And the candle was I put in there that the intent of it was every time you light this candle, I hope that you recognise what you went through.
Yeah.
You know. And she really so deeply, you know, loved that. And then, you know, every week I check in with her, how are you going? How's your body feeling? Asking those questions that nobody asks you. And, you know, it's really important to be that support to other people, because other people around you or around somebody asking those questions also prompts us to ask those of ourselves, because sometimes, you know, as a way to protect ourselves, we disconnect and we don't actually ask ourselves how we're feeling, you know, and how we're moving on and what we need, because it's easier to distract ourselves often in those kinds of things. It really is. So the other thing I actually want to talk about is, if you're going beyond that, we also, for our baby, had a tree planting ceremony with my husband and my 2 kids. And so we bought a particular tree that I really loved, and we each wrote a letter or drew a picture to this child. And we planted it with the tree and said a prayer or a wish or whatever we wanted to say as we, you know, planted this tree. And for me, that was beautiful. For our kids who were too young really to kind of really grasp what that meant, it was fantastic for them, I think, one, to witness grief and how you move through it in a cathartic way. And 2, to have a recognition of life. You know, because ultimately those things, you know, these things serve us to become more grateful for what we have, don't they? I mean, that would have, I've got no doubt that the connection that brought for you and your husband, you know, to be able to talk through that and work. I mean, and some couples it wouldn't, but I'm sure in your case it probably did. It totally did. But that was because I was willing to be open and vulnerable and receiving. I knew I needed loving and nurturing. I knew that I wanted this experience to be recognised rather than brushed under the rug. And I think because my intentions were very clear, it was easy for those people around me to meet that experience. Except for a couple, but there were a couple of friends that were so awkward they didn't know what to do or how to handle it, and would say, just stupid stuff.
And that, I mean, and that's normal. You're going to get that. You know, and that's also part of your growth through it, because you almost, sometimes we, as callous as some comments might feel, because people just don't know how to communicate it.
They don't know.
And it also serves us sometimes, because it means that we don't also get too stuck in it. You know, everything has its season, you know, and we don't also want to run the story for years about these things, because then we're not actually growing from it, then we're sitting in it.
But if we've been able to really sit in it and be really supported, we should be able to move through it.
That's it, yes.
So if you haven't moved through it and that grief is still stuck in your body, it's because you haven't really moved it. You haven't really sat in it. You haven't really owned that pain and that process, because like we always talk about, there is a greater scheme. There are gifts out of that super hard shit.
And there's, you know, there's 2 sides to it. There's something that we're not seeing. I mean, the bigger the grief, you know, is kind of the bigger the polarization. You know,
and it was, you and I have talked about that. I took totally for granted my first 2 pregnancies. You know, they just kind of happened, except for my first. He was a total surprise. And then I had a bleed 6 weeks in and we thought we'd had a miscarriage.
Yeah, right.
And you have never seen my head spin from, I don't want this baby, to, oh my God, I want this baby, like I don't care about anything else in this world.
Wow.
And that I really still
Which is
believe
really
that shift
beautiful.
in intent. And I prayed to that baby. I talked to that baby so many times. I can't even tell you, it was 6 weeks old or something, you know, in my womb.
Yeah.
I want you to stay. I really desperately want you to forget everything I've been saying over the last, you know, 3 weeks, whatever it was. And I really think that that intent made him stay, but that also created the consciousness, the pregnancy, and the birth that I had because I shifted so quickly into that. And same as this time round, this decision to have a third baby was me kind of really wanting it. My husband going, I think we're kind of done. You know, kids are older. We're moving on. Me longing for it and probably not being consciously open about that or owning that. And so drunk night, bang, I'm pregnant. And I have to say in my head, I was a bit like, woohoo, now we've got no choice. You can't even make the decision for me.
Yeah, right.
Like that's where I was at.
Yeah.
And then this baby.
Were you feeling a little bit guilty about that?
Yeah, I was. I was.
That's interesting.
And so, and then this baby who I thought was still there, obviously then wasn't there. And it, particularly having a miscarriage, I don't know, it felt really traumatic because I was going to that scan expecting, you know, it wasn't a private experience, it was a public one.
Yeah. I resonate with that. And I think
that's
also,
really different.
and I think that sense that, you know, I really felt like my body's betrayed me.
Yes.
You know, because you think that you should be connected enough to know that.
Yes.
And I actually know now. I did know, but I didn't want to know.
I kind of think that too. I specifically remember being sick, and literally waking up one morning, bang, sickness gone.
Yeah, and I had like sore boobs for a while, and then I just didn't anymore. From about 8 or 9 weeks, I didn't even feel like I was pregnant anymore. So, you know, I knew, but I didn't want to know.
And like you, that experience brought for me having lost that baby and moved from, not really consciously wanting a baby, kind of do, but not willing to own it, to my husband and I having those really deep emotional conversations, because that experience allowed him to connect in emotionally. I do really want another child, as opposed to being in his masculine, let's just move forward and get that house and get that next career and, you know, Yeah. He slipped right into it because he'd fallen in love with this process, this future and this baby already. And so that then created more space for me to really own how much I wanted this experience and have a really conscious time with my body and my soul to really heal and consciously create a baby. So I love this concept of conscious conception. Yeah. So literally bringing awareness and consciousness to the moment that spirit enters your body. The moment you know, and I have always known, and just the ability to know, even when a test can't tell you, that you now really are called to honor your body as you move through. So I really kind of think that's the gifts out of this super hard experience was the consciousness and the intent and the love bomb that came with the baby that followed that.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked before about the kind of birth you had
that's
with that
right.
baby too.
And I don't think any of that would have been the way it was had we not had that connection to this soul and then the grief loss process. I don't think we could have got there had we not had that. And I'm just going to go off on a really wacko tangent for a minute because I just have to share this story. When I went under my general anaesthetic, I had to have my D&C for that miscarriage. I had set an intent at the start. It was a really emotional day going into the hospital, checking in, having the tablets to start
The process.
cramping and bleeding.
Yeah.
It's a long time. You talk to a lot of nurses. There's a lot of waiting, you know, and it's a very medical process. And you're still, I was still very much stuck in the emotions of it all. And so as I'm laying on that theatre table, having my anaesthetic to start going under, I remember saying to myself, I just want the opportunity to say goodbye. And do you know what? I don't know if you believe in astro travel or not, but I did.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
I went somewhere and I can so vividly know it was not a dream because it was so centrally open. Everything is so sharp when you're in those soul moments that I got to sit with my adult child.
Oh my gosh.
And feel that energy and feel the love and the adoration. I got to actually enjoy it.
Wow.
And then I can literally remember I was playing a game of cards with my child, and I was yanked out of it like being pulled in a suction vortex. And I remember screaming, wanting to go back to this child. And I woke up, and before I was even consciously aware, recognised I was crying.
Wow.
Before my consciousness has returned to my body, I was already crying coming out of the anaesthetic.
Wow.
To the point where I had nurses around me, and one bloody male nurse across the other side of the room went, "Oh, you're the D&C girl, aren't you?"
Oh, gosh. Oh, God.
So I just kind of want to, with that story, open up the possibility that the veil between worlds on a soul level is fine.
It's paper thin.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
I've cried through it. Sorry about that.
I love that. I love that you're able to go into that, you know, and really feel that.
I can still so intimately feel that crystal clear love and perfection, you know?
And you felt like that created some healing?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So much. I can't even tell you.
Wow. And so once you'd been through that procedure, were you know, inverted commas, okay? Like, did that create a shift for you?
Yeah, it did. It really did. I cried a lot for the rest of that day, but it was that day that we bought our tree. So on the way home from the hospital, my husband and I stopped off and bought the tree and the pot and everything else we needed for our ceremony.
Yeah.
And then when we got home, I had time alone, and I drew a picture of what I'd seen, and I wrote a letter to this child that was just what I planted. That was no longer just a letter to myself or to this imaginary person. I knew this person already. You know, you know when you know someone because you can feel them?
Yeah.
I knew who this person was.
Wow.
And so I could write a gratitude letter because I knew this person. And that's what I planted. And I have to tell you, massive shifts. I then spent the next week, I have to say, like a hermit. The first day I left the house after being caved in my grief was really hard. But it got easier over the following week. And I still now think about what I went through with gratitude because of what it brought for my third child that's, you know, alive and well now, for what it brought me through my wounds. And to be honest, for that moment with that soul was extraordinary.
That's just so powerful.
I talked enough about myself, Bridget.
No, but I mean, I'm just thinking about, like, you know, my experience, and I remember, like, I was quite I really called on my masculine energy, you know, to really get through that process. Like, I was really composed. I was chatting to, because I really wanted to be. I can't
understand that. I just can't even get how you're that. How are you so composed?
I think I was really looking for the gifts in it. And in fact, and you know, through what I'm learning, I know this, that for every grief has a polar opposite, which is relief. So for every grief, there's a sense of relief that's not often revealed to us. And I know actually that I felt that, like, part of me felt that because I had been so consumed by this fear of this baby not being there, that there was almost a sense of relief when it wasn't, because I just knew then. It had been confirmed for me, you know? And so as painful as that grief was, there was still a part of me that knew. And so, because I knew there was no more wondering. And there was almost a freedom, you know, even though it was so not what I wanted, it was really interesting dynamic. And so, and because I was so intentional about the pregnancy, and, you know, even that pregnancy, I had a lot of acupuncture beforehand. I was in the hospital and I was talking to a trainee obstetrician, and I was like, I want him to know that women can be powerful through this. I want him to know that women can be intentional with their pregnancies and be intentional and choose their own way. And so I was really using this as an opportunity to teach him, you know, about
How did you do that? What do you mean?
Well, I'd explained to him, because I explained to him that I had PCOS, and so I'd been having acupuncture for a long time. You know, so for his understanding of PCOS might be you go on the pill for 10 years and you figure out, and that's what fixes it. So I really saw my role as an opportunity to say, no, there's a different way, you know, and almost to use my place there in that moment, and with him in the room, to be almost an educator, you know, as opposed to a passenger of what was happening to me. So that's sort of how and that also allowed me to step a bit more into my power, and feel like that it all wasn't lost, that there was some way that I could use this to serve. So I remember that moment being quite cathartic for me, because I was also able to talk it through with a health professional who was actually willing to listen. You know, I was actually not going to judge the way I'd chosen to do things. He was actually taking it on board. But I do remember just before I went under, you know, being quite afraid and quite, you know, sad. You know, I was saying to the nurses, like, I'm 27, like, you know, don't wreck anything in there. Like, I've got to have children. I was just like, don't like wreck my womb. I've got to have children, you know.
That's a huge, I'm laughing, but that's a huge amount of fear.
Yeah, there was fear there, definitely. You know, because it's, you know what it's, you know, going under.
Oh, totally.
You know,
You've
like,
got your
no
consciousness
control.
gone.
You know, you're totally vulnerable. But yeah, and I mean, I had, like, I think mine happened on a Thursday or something. And my boss was great because I was working full time, and she's great. And she's like, you know, just take the weekend off. But, you know, I was back at work on Monday, full time again. And some guy at work was like, oh, you know, you had a long weekend. I hope you had a great time. God. And that just stuck, like, it was just like a dagger in my heart, you know, and you're just expected to pick yourself up and keep on going, you know? And
did him saying that, but I'm only going to say this in your story because I'm still hearing, where's the tears and the emotion?
Oh, no, I didn't. No, I felt it. I definitely sat in it. But I think, you know, there's a couple of things that happened, like, you know, a doctor saying that it was just a blighted ovum, and, you know, of course you get, you know, people saying to me, you know, well, everything happens for a reason, or, you know, other people not calling. That almost, for me, added insult to injury in my pain. I hated that statement,
everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
It does. And actually, when you're out of it, I get it.
Yeah.
But when you're in it, don't fucking say that.
Yeah, and it doesn't really serve. Well, everything serves, but it didn't feel like it did in that moment at all. But I think I processed it a lot internally. You know, I really worked through it. You know, writing was, you know, part of what I shared, and, you know, it was really hard. I mean, I know that, you know, people around us are reflecting us. So my unwillingness to be totally vulnerable with my husband meant that he didn't really know how to be with me. You know, like, so that was never him, it was me. You know, I was creating that. And so he didn't really kind of know. Of course he felt grief too, but I think he channeled it in ways that perhaps weren't the ways that I wanted him to.
That's interesting, because that's almost exactly opposite to my experience, isn't it? Because I said almost exactly that statement. I knew what I wanted, and so I was very clear about what I wanted.
Yeah, so I don't really know that I knew. Well, I don't think that I had a strong intention about how
to deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so I wasn't as sure of how to call on that.
Yeah.
And I really have relied.
Which is where most women are. You've got to remember, I've been 3 years of a doula and all sorts of birth stuff.
And like, let's highlight here that your experience would be the minority of being able to be really intentional.
Totally. But that's why I want to bring voice to this as well. Because there is a way to move through it with grace.
Yeah.
And with love. And with healing.
And I really didn't, you know, some friends of mine were pregnant at the time, and another friend, you know, was due, like, in that same week that I was due with this baby, and like, I didn't want to take away from any of those experiences.
It's a hard one, isn't it? Awkward on all levels.
Yeah. But fortunately I was pregnant again with my son by the time she'd had that baby, because I think I would have found that particularly confronting. But yeah, like, I actually felt I wanted to almost give more to those couples around me who I had that genuine love for out of my experience. You know, like, I almost felt that was in a way healing to me. And I think, you know, this is just classic example of how we all find our own way through these things, and we all find the tools that we need in the time to grow from it. And I wouldn't change a thing.
No, to be honest, I wouldn't either. And in a way, I'm kind of grateful I went through it, because I had been so immersed in women for so many years, but I'd never had the experience of this loss. So how could I connect with women really
who had that?
Who had.
Yeah.
And the gifts through that it's allowed me, plus the gifts that it brought for my third child and for myself and our relationship, are phenomenal.
It's just not always easy to see it, and that's why
you can't see it in the moment though. So it's no good.
Or you can, but you have to work hard.
I don't know. I kind of think in the moment, I don't know, but for me, I need to just sit. I'm not even say wallow. I need to just really be allowed the freedom and the space to experience as much depth as I want to.
Yeah. And I think also be comfortable in you know, expressing the full range of human emotion that comes with that.
You can't, do you know, this is the thing of polarities. You can't ever experience extreme high joy, amazing life juice unless you also can experience the other end of the spectrum of the incredibly dark, deep stuff. You can't go, well, I'll just have the good stuff and not own the other part.
No.
Because it cuts your spectrum. It literally, like,
and it also calls in more experiences to break that fantasy. Like, you know, the more that you get attached to this idea of everything having to be perfect and lovely and joyful and blissful, and, you know, you get addicted to that, then you'll create circumstances in which to break that fantasy, because you cannot live your life one half of yourself, one half of a human experience, one half of nature. You know, nature doesn't behave like that. Nature has all seasons. You know, you're asking nature to live outside universal laws. You're therefore asking yourself to do the same. It's not possible. But, you know, we love the idea of it, and hence positive thinking and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, us always trying to lift ourselves out of negative emotion tends to perpetuate. But that actually creates more pain, though, because we're trying to ask ourselves to do the impossible.
And creates more opportunity, therefore, to experience pain.
Yeah. Until you love it. Until you see that the pain is just as much a part of it. It's just as much a part of the joy. It's just as much a part of the happiness. You know, just as summer is just as necessary as winter. You know, everything is needed and nothing is wrong. And the more we're grateful for every season, the less extreme seasons we need to experience.
I'm striving for that. I don't know how successfully.
I think, and the thing is, you know, you overcome one thing and you just rise to the next level, because that's growth. That's you know, we're all climbing a quantum. Like, it's just how it works to be human. And no one is more evolved than anyone else. Actually, no, that's not probably true. But, you know, there are some people who aren't. But, you know, we're all here and we're all tackling our own journeys, and, you know, miscarriage is one of those things. And that it's painful and that we need to give voice to it, and that's absolutely what we're doing here today. And I hope that by us sharing our stories, and so I think quite rawly, you know,
that was okay.
Gives voice to those other women who might be sitting in it, or who might really still feel that there's healing to be done there. Because, you know,
or even tools and tips on how to help the woman that's been through it. To help her have voice. Because she may not have the toolkit either.
And sometimes, I mean, it challenges us too, because we don't know what to say. And sometimes it's okay to not know what to say. It could just be a beautiful care package like what you did. You know, if you don't quite have the words, there are so many other ways to show that you care. And it's just,
and that you recognise their loss.
It's just finding that, and finding what, you know, what you're comfortable doing, and also how that person will value that.
Definitely. So let's move on and talk about, if you want to connect with Bridget at suburbansandcastles.com, your upcoming movie is...
The Empowerment Project, which is happening on the 14th of October in Melbourne, and it's just going to be a beautiful celebration of being a woman and, you know, using our extraordinary gifts and really asking ourselves the question, you know, what would happen if you couldn't fail? You know, what would you do? Which I just love that idea. I love that. It's kind of dancing with, you know, kind of all those things that we would love to do, but just shut ourselves down on doing, you know, like it's just dancing with possibility. So I'm really excited about that one, and we'll both be there, so if you want to come and have a chat, it'd be awesome.
And you can connect with me through naturopathicbirth.com.au and through our Facebook page for both of us. We love comments and inspiration and ideas on tell us what's resonating with you. Because we never know. Kind of putting it out there.
You're taking your front.
So that's Nourishing the Mother on Facebook, and on Instagram. We do have daily feeds on there for your daily inspiration. And we have a retreat coming up on the 8th of November, which is a one-day immersive for women only, to delve into your story, your belief systems, the things that hold you back, and how to get in touch with your life juice. So that is also on our Facebook page that you can connect with. So until next week, when we peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.